Great, guys. Welcome to the Global Innovation Forum and our session on workplace happiness and well-being. I'm delighted to be joined by two august experts in this field. Catalina Cernica. Catalina is the CEO of the Health and Happiness Research Foundation, a not-for-profit organization that aims to accelerate the adoption of well-being measures and frameworks in the design and delivery of better healthcare. Catalina, great to have you here.
Thank you.
And then Scott Shute. Scott, after a career as an executive at LinkedIn, was until very recently head of mindfulness and compassion there, where he helped the team at LinkedIn develop characteristics like emotional intelligence, resilience, and a better sense of well-being. Author of The Full Body Yes, he's now taking the goodness he'd been building at LinkedIn to a wider audience. Scott, likewise, great to have you as well. Thank you for joining us.
Good to be here.
So guys, just to get us started, I know this is going to be a really rich conversation, very close to my heart, but can we start with what may seem like an obvious question? Why is it important for companies to address workplace happiness and well-being?
Sure. Catalina, do you want to start?
Okay, I'll give it a try and kind of like maybe set it up from the, if you like, from the science perspective.
Yeah.
Because I think what we've learned in the last probably up to 10 years, so it's not necessarily, you know, the newest topic, is that happier employees are better employees.
Okay.
And we're learning more and more about that, you know, and we have now data that, you know, happier employees make companies be 30% more profitable, or, you know, raise the share price. They also make, you know, more cooperant workers. They make less errors. They are more present, more involved in the company. On the other side, we also now have data that unhappy employees, you know, have more sick leave. They are less engaged with the company. They are less interested in collaborating and working together. They are more likely to leave the company, which also, you know, can be quantified in the dollar sign, if you like. And I think the latest evaluation I've seen was that in the US, unhappy employees cost the economy up to something like 500 million a year or something. It's even billion a year, something like that. So it's big sums, and because of that, you know, companies are paying attention to the topic.
Okay, so as well as being a kind of good corporate citizen, as it were, there are some real clear bottom line implications for this.
Yeah.
And I'd add that it's never been more important for companies, right? If we think about the history of work, workers, our employees, have never been more valuable. You know, if you think about the history of work from the agrarian age and kind of building the pyramids, kings and slaves, and then landowners and serfs, to the industrial age where people in a factory all made the same thing, and in neither case were super highly valued. In today's world, in the information age, many companies don't have hard goods. They don't have manufacturing lines. They just have data, which means by far our biggest asset as a company is the employees. So taking care of your employees, investing in your employees, as Catalina said, is critical and just makes great business sense.
Yeah. And Scott, I mean, to that end, I guess with the shift through COVID and an employee, I mean, we're seeing kind of, you know, the great resignation, aren't we, at the moment, and things like that, working from home. That increased flexibility maybe makes it more important than ever to keep a happy workforce, does it?
Absolutely. I mean, you see companies, and it seems like every company in the world is trying to figure out their own unique solution to what we call the great reshuffle. And being able to trust your employees, being able to make sure that they are at their best, creating that sense of trust between the company and the employee is really critical. One of the recent studies, and there's tons of these I've seen, but one of the recent surveys I saw said that in America, 56% of employees are actively looking for their next role. Well, it's my belief that those 56% will end up with a company or a manager who's willing to invest in them. Right? Because over the past year and a half or more, pretty much every information worker in the world is rethinking, like, why am I doing this? Why am I working? And so in that great reshuffle, employees want to work at companies that really care for them, that really invest in them, and don't just treat them like a cog in a machine.
Yeah.
But I think that COVID, and I agree with you, Scott. COVID has been an accelerated process for people to reevaluate their lives.
Yeah.
But I would kind of like, bring to the table also the angle from the companies, because I would say that not everybody is ready to accept this. I think the fact that we're having this conversation about happiness today is because it's almost just a label that companies say, we're actually realizing after a year of, Zoom conversations and kids in the back and dogs, in front of the screen and stuff like that, that people have lives.
Yeah.
And more importantly, that mental health and social well-being is also important. And I think this is where the companies have the big challenge right now, is how do we redesign, the way we work in a way that not only delivers, results and hard numbers in productivity, but also create an environment that nurtures well-being and helps people, basically live thriving, happy lives.
Yeah. Actually, I think there's, if we open a news browser or a newspaper, if anyone still does that, and we see all of the challenges in the world, I actually think that companies can play a gigantic part in the healing that can happen and must happen for us to move forward. Because companies now have as much power, or maybe more power, and ability to influence in ways that religions and governments have had for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And so I think there's three ways that companies can help us connect, right? Can help us connect to purpose. And this starts at the top. It starts with a leadership team deciding why they are in business. Is it only for shareholders, or is it for, the greater good? Actually, it turns out the science, the research shows that companies who take care of a balance of all of their stakeholders are actually more profitable than ones who only focus on just their shareholders. So that makes good business sense too. So anyway, a company can help us connect to something bigger by focusing the messaging on what the company is doing for good in the world. Because then as an employee, I look up and say, wow, I'm really proud of the company that I work for, which means that my work matters, which at a deeper sense, it means that my life matters. And then companies can help us connect to each other. We have all this division in the world, but at work, in a company, on a team, there are people from every flavor of that division, and we're all working towards the same thing. And that can help heal some of these divisions that exist between us. And then companies can help us connect to ourselves by providing resources like access to mental wellness, whether it's meditation or mindfulness programs, or access to therapy at scale. So companies can play a huge role in our society's healing moving forward.
Yeah. No, I think that's so important. And I've certainly seen a lot of studies showing that trusting companies compared to governments and the like is through the pandemic risen, as people have found. And Catalina, I know you're much hotter on some of this, but whether someone's in place of employment made them feel safe and secure during COVID had a long-term impact on their sort of mental well-being down the line. I've seen studies along those lines. So from Scott, I love the idea. So connecting to purpose, connecting to each other. And again, I think within that, we all know that there's a diversity and inclusion agenda that really needs to be stepped up in many, many cases, and connecting to ourselves. Catalina, from you, I mean, you're working with a lot of big companies or smaller companies. How are they starting, or how are you helping them start to put some of these things into action?
I probably need to say first that I'm more of on the cynical side
Okay.
So I totally agree with everything that Scott says. But I think, you know how it is. I think, the devil is in the execution of this.
Yeah.
Because, if all the companies in the world will try to connect to a greater good,
Yeah.
we ended up with companies who, I don't know, instead of saying that they're producing chewing gum, they will say they're producing joy and all that kind of stuff. And at some point, it's a little bit too much. But I also think that it is dangerous to put all the responsibility on the individual, because I think that's unfortunately what has happened in the last few years. And again, it has been accelerated by COVID and by this remote work, where, and you've probably heard in the last 2-3 years, the rise of the chief happiness officer, who's actually somebody who organizes the Friday drinks, and I think it should be a little bit more than that, So, and it's not like we have a high level of burnout or people are unhappy. Here's the yoga class. That's my kind of like, it is like Scott says, we need to look at all the levels, but also be very kind of like self-critical about what really means and what is important. And we've been working with companies to basically map out what makes happiness for their people as people, not as employees. It's kind of like, probably that's a little bit of a change. Employees are also people, not only consumers are people and stuff like that. And then determine what is important for the company to be involved with. And, probably not a surprise, the things that you're talking about are coming up high on the list. How do we build more trust? And that is related to transparent communication. It's related to giving everybody an equal voice, especially when it's about a task that relates to their work. It's also about fostering diversity and inclusion. And this is big conversation. It's not only about, we have, a high level of unhappiness. Where do we buy some yoga classes? It's actually asking the question, how can we change the whole company and put these things together?
It's interesting when you start to spin the conversation from being about employees to people. We talk about human first, so not consumers, but people. It changes the lens through which you examine these things. And I remember you've said to me before that one of the great stats of why employees leave companies is a bad boss. But I think you talk more about, kind of to Scott's point about connecting to each other. There's a more impactful measurement around that and how people feel and connect with their colleagues. Is that right?
Yeah. It's, and I try not to over geek out on this, but basically, traditionally, happiness at work is translating into job satisfaction. And job satisfaction is driven by how good your boss is, are you paid fairly, and do you get to do work that is meaningful for you and gives you some satisfaction. But when you ask the question, how happy are you, and you kind of like recognize that as a workplace, as a company, you're just part of somebody's life, then you can map out the bigger themes, like the quality of your relationships. And you're right, having a friend at work is more predictive of somebody's happiness than the quality of the boss. And people do leave bosses most of the time, not companies. We also see things like level of trust, perception of fairness and inclusion. We see the overall mental health and physical well-being, and we ran recently a survey to actually build more hypotheses around what drives good work, because we see a lot of companies who've kind of like decided on the top, total remote work is the best in the world, that's what we're going to do, or no, we have to be 100% in the office because that's what fosters creativity and collaboration. We don't know. So we went out there and we asked a small group of people, first of all, what are the key drivers of good work for them? And then we asked how those drivers have been affected by the last 18 months, to refer to the pandemic. And the most important thing on top of it is not, and we've been all talking about the importance of fostering innovation and accepting failure and moving fast. The most important thing on people's list is actually their overall well-being. If I feel well, if I sleep well, if I'm mentally there, I'm going to do my best work. And it sounds obvious, but I think somehow we have to, if we accept this, we have to go back to the basics and accept that our mental and physical and social health is the most important thing.
Mm-hmm. And even though we've talked about these business cases and businesses understand that, yes, we want our employees to be at their best, there's still this arc of acceptance that happens with things like mindfulness. So let's just take meditation practice or mindfulness practice as an example. So I recently discovered, I didn't really know this, that physical exercise is a relatively new thing, right? So Nike didn't start until the 70s. There's articles about, CEOs in the 70s and 80s, like this person is running and no one's even chasing them. It was a very strange thing 50 years ago. And now every company who's a big company and has lots of people has a gym, or they have encouraged their employees to be well through things like hydration or sleep or physical exercise. But mindfulness is still, for some people, weird, right? But it's on the same journey of the early adopters are there and the science is there, but the practice hasn't quite happened. Mm. And so I think for mindfulness specifically, a couple of things need to happen. One is we need to decouple the religious or spiritual aspect of it from the work piece. Because some people are still like, oh, it's a Buddhist thing or it's an Eastern thing and I'm something else, so that can't be at work. But if we treat it as for its secular nature, for its benefits there, and see the science behind it, then it's really powerful. And I think we're on the same journey. Hopefully it doesn't take us 50 years to get to the point where, if I ask you what you're doing after work, oh, I'm going to check out the 5 o'clock meditation class, and nobody rolls their eyes.
Yeah.
Everybody's just like, oh, yeah, of course. Well, I'm glad you're taking care of it. And it's available to all. Not everybody does it, but it's available to all. So we're on this arc of normalcy, I think.
That's a really nice place just to take a look at the work Jack's been doing in the background. So we've got Jack from Live Illustration Limited here, beautifully drawing away. Yeah, let's just spotlight. We're yo-yoing in and out. There we go. Thank you for this, Jack. I love it. I mean, Jack has started with a blank sheet of paper and lots of smiley faces, which is great to see. So yeah, these works of art will be winging their way to you, Scott and Catalina, after the talk. But
excellent.
Very cool.
So
that is very cool. I wish you could do that.
I'd like to add to Scott's point.
Yeah,
because I think you're right. The science is there. And actually, from a sense, because the Health and Happiness Foundation, like the name suggests, we're very much interested in the connection between health and happiness. And we know that mindfulness training improves blood sugar levels and improves our immune response. So I think there is a journey there. I hope it's going to be more accelerated. And it's something that probably as an individuals we all have to embrace. I think it's a matter of how we're going to make it part of a bigger framework and make sure that we challenge companies. They don't stop only at that.
So a framework we've been talking about at LinkedIn is around compassion, right? So mindfulness is the development of self, but compassion is how we work together. And that's what I'm really excited about, because this is how companies operate. So we talk about operationalizing compassion, and it creates this underpinning of goodness, which allows all of these things to happen. So first, let me define it. So my definition of compassion is, first, it's the capacity to have an awareness of others, a mindset of wishing the best for them, and then the courage to take action. And it happens both at the people side, on the employee side, but also on the customer side. So for employees, instead of creating a 1,000-page playbook about how to do this, it starts with a simple statement at the top. And for every company, these are their values. Now, whether they live their values or not, it's a different thing. But it starts with something simple like treat people beautifully. And then every policy we put in place, every one-on-one meeting with a manager, every thing that we do starts with treat people beautifully. And on the customer side, it starts at LinkedIn with something like members first or customers first. And again, you can go to every decision, every way of working, and does it have this, members first idea? Now, it's not members only, because the business still has to be in business, but it's a nice balance. It's a nice, simple way to have a framework that says, here's our intention for the type of company we're going to be. And it allows the decision-making to happen at the lowest level possible, because you only have to remember one thing.
No, I love those guiding lights, those North Star values that really inform decisions. I think at its worst, purpose or values become things that are either impossible to apply to day-to-day business, or are so sort of highfalutin that maybe the C-suite can use them, but actually for the guy or the gal on the floor, it's sort of meaningless. So I think, again, if you can use that to guide decisions and guide everyday actions, that's powerful.
Yes, and it does have to have all of the systems built in to support it. So if the CEO says it, or the head of sales says it, our head of sales will stand in front of 6,000 people at kickoff and say, hey, our job is to provide long-term value. So don't sell something our customers don't need just so you can hit quota.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. But if the systems at the base level penalize that person for, the behavior, then it's a problem. So all of the behaviors have to match the voice at the top.
Can I ask you both a question? Because you've both used the word trust quite a lot. And I'd love to understand two things about trust. What for you it means, because it's a big word. It's a word we all use a lot. I trust you, I don't trust you. I trust my company, I don't trust it. So is there a kind of definition for you guys? And also what companies can do and employers can do to engender greater trust?
Yeah.
The
definition we use is consistency over time.
Okay.
Right? Consistency over time. You can say something but if you say it, do it, say it, do it, then it's like, okay, well now there's this word trust, this thing that is a baseline between us.
Okay.
It's kind of like indicates the behavior that you're looking for, because I think trust is something that you have to earn. Probably the way the concepts that we use to define trust is the presence of psychological safety, where basically people are not afraid to raise an opinion or a concern, and they don't think that their careers are going to be affected in any way if they are honest. But it's also a feeling of you have my back, I have your back. And I think that is related to kind of like a common effort, if you like, and a sense of belonging to a team. And I think, and again, one of my favorite quotes that came out of the pandemic is that we've realized that our workplaces, are not family, and that's okay.
Yes.
We are a team, and we should probably focus more on metaphors like the sports teams and not necessarily a family.
I don't know whether you guys have read the great book Legacy by James Kerr, which takes the New Zealand All Blacks as an example, probably one of the most successful sports teams in history. But he talks in that about their essence as, first of all, they're a high-performing team. They have some great values like the no dickheads rule. It doesn't matter how good you are, if you're a dickhead, you're not going to be an All Black. But I think this idea of a common sense of identity, that you're part of, you have a shared history, and that things are going to go on after you as well is really powerful. And belonging to a team that's
really hard to build. I'm not an expert in diversity and inclusion, but I know that is a tough topic, and we will have to address it properly if we're serious about happiness at work. And one of the things that I really wanted to say, it's kind of like an example of how not to do it, is that it's a big consulting company. I'm not going to name names. You can Google it. Allegedly decided that the best way to help senior women to more senior roles was to give them golf lessons, because that's what they do. They go play golf and network with clients. And I'm kind of saying this is not being, inclusive. This is an example of how you take, kind of idea, okay, we have to be better at building trust and supporting everybody, and then going and doing, that, or just organizing the beers on Friday. I think we have to make a bolder step and say, we don't need, to kind of say, open the game for everybody and say, we're going to give, golf lessons for everybody. So you get the chance to network, and you get the chance to network like we, the boys, are doing. It's more about how do we change the game?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't like golf, so that would be wasted on me.
No, your company is not taking golf lessons. That's good.
No, I just make them play rugby every Friday. Scott, closer to your part of the world, that brings to mind there was a lot of news a few years back about companies paying for women to freeze eggs, again, I suspect that falls very squarely in the golf lessons in people's minds, but
I like to keep this simple. Is it compassionate? Do we have really awareness of others? What do people want? Both our employees, our customers. Do we have a mindset of wishing the best for them? Like, do we really want them to be successful? And then the courage to take action. And sometimes it's this courage to take action that's hard, right? You mentioned kind of the no jerks rule. There's lots of words we could insert there, but it's really powerful. And it requires the most senior leaders to be number 3, to take action when they see it happening, right? Which also requires them to be aware, right? So it goes back to these really simple things that are extraordinarily hard to implement, but kind of easy to understand. And then just kind of the over and over and over on the basics.
And that circles back very neatly to that point about trust. It's the say it, do it, repeat.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I, as time is kind of coming towards a close, I'd like to look ahead a little bit, because clearly the world of work has changed. And whether people are going fully remote, hybrid, or even back to the office, I do feel that there has been a significant change. I'd love to get your thoughts on whether this shift in working practices seems like it should be a positive, or are there any kind of watch outs that might help or hinder our happiness at work? Catalina, do you have any kind of thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think there is a watch out and an opportunity. Yeah. I think the opportunity is that we're going to reinvent the roles of team leaders and middle managers, and because we are not taking care of the delivery of the spreadsheet. We're not just managing spreadsheets, we're managing the well-being of our teams, and that is a massive change. And and middle managers have been basically getting bad press for 50 years. It's time we reinvent a little bit the concept. The big watch out is loneliness.
Yeah, I
think loneliness is on the rise, and we can have another hour discussing only that and how it impacts our health and our overall well-being and our capacity to live productive lives at work and happy lives at work. So I think there's a big watch out for companies there, and I think it is somehow back to fostering connections and fostering honesty that allows people to engage and really be honest about that. Because you can be lonely not only because you're missing the social interaction, but you can be lonely because you feel isolated and you're different and you don't fit in with the boys going to the golf lessons. So yeah, that would be my
That,
kind of like giveaway.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point about loneliness and isolation, because I do feel that it's one thing where we've all been in it together, but actually in a world where there is a bit more of a hybrid, even that you're working slightly different days, you know, you can feel excluded at meetings because you're remote and the conversation's going on in the room, can't you? And things
Yeah,
like that.
exactly.
Scott, what about you? I mean, what are the opportunities and the dangers?
Sure. I think COVID has brought us a gift. Okay, the gift may not be financially or emotionally or any of those things, but I would take it up a level to call it spiritually, right? It's caused people to stop and say, who do I want to be and what's most important to me right now? And if then we phrase it in the context of business as a manager, you know, we have evolved from the agrarian age of just do what I said to do because I'm in charge. And now it's even harder and harder and harder to be a successful manager. And at the highest level, just as a person and a manager, I think that life never gives us more than we can handle, but it sometimes gives us more than we can handle with our current recipe, right? So it requires us to grow. And so as we grow, we learn to be more compassionate. I have to now I have to be aware of my employees, and I have to be also aware of their mental well-being. So in other words, an opportunity to become more compassionate. If we use another word, an opportunity to become more conscious, both as individuals and as organizations themselves. So I think it's an incredible growth opportunity. I agree with everything tactically that Catalina said. It comes with great risk, right? It will be harder to manage in this world, and it has the potential to be so much more powerful in learning to be in touch with ourselves and other people and be a force for good in the world.
Yeah. So a compassionate company, which, let's face it, is compassionate individuals looking after and caring for each other, which I think we started to see a little bit more of, as Catalina says. You know, you saw real life, you saw real people, you saw their real sort of kind of issues, and whether it was dogs or children or whatever it was, coming through, I think, in a much more acute way over the last 18 months. Let's not forget about that. Let's show our care. Well, Catalina, Scott, I think our time is probably nearly up. I'd just like to go back to Jack's picture here. And Jack, thank you for this. So yeah, some wonderful captures of those insights, and building trust, empowered kind of employees and managers post-COVID. How can we help society heal? So again, I hope Scott and Catalina, he's pulled out some of the nuggets that you feel are most pertinent.
Beautiful.
But
Cool.
That's been a wonderful conversation. I can't thank you both enough. It's a really rich area with a strong bottom line direction to it, as you started off talking about at the beginning, but also as we finished, you know, just that human ability, that human need to have and show compassion to one another, I think is a wonderful thought, and a wonderful one for us all to take back into our businesses. So with that, thank you, Scott. Thank you, Catalina. I hope you go well.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.